Hi everyone, Dave Birkett, Detroit Free Press here. Monday morning, early Monday morning, the day before the Detroit Lions report for training camp, and figured it was a good time to do a little video talk with everyone here about what's ahead, what to expect from the Lions in the season, and maybe look at their roster. But also in light of the news today that the Miami Marlins home opener against the Baltimore Orioles was being postponed because of the spread of coronavirus, and look, I can't pretend to have answers for you. Certainly I'm anxious to see, what the fall holds for the Lions, and as this virus continues to spread, whether we will have an NFL season, whether we'll start it, whether we'll finish it. I do think that, if the NFL starts it, it's going to try to do everything it can to finish it because all the money at stake, the guaranteed money that's owed to players once games begin. But beyond that, look, the reports coming out now about the Marlins are, I think it's 14 players, at least 14 players have tested positive for coronavirus. They canceled their game against, the Orioles for later today. And it's just something that, I don't know. I have my doubts about how sports, football, baseball, all these sports not operating in a bubble. And this goes from the professional ranks on down to, my kids are 11 and 5, going on 6, and how they're going to be able to play their sports, going forward as the pandemic continues to rage. So I don't think there are a lot of good answers. In a bubble, you can do it in a bubble, right? The NBA, the NHL, Major League Soccer, I think we've seen where, there are very few cases and they are operating, but that takes millions of dollars. It's impractical, obviously, for anyone outside the professional sports ranks. And given the size of NFL rosters, the travel, the length of the season, it was something the NFL never really considered. And so I don't know. I'm wondering, I want to hear from you guys out there what your concerns are about the season. I know I've heard from various fans out there who wonder, say cancel it or don't think there's going to be any fans at games, or some people say, yeah, they're going to play. I guess it's sort of like the world itself and what we're living in, that, the way some people are treating, coronavirus. Some people see it as something serious. Some people see it as a hoax and just want to get back to normal life. But, when you see instances like today or like over this weekend where the Marlins started testing positive, first it was a couple cases and then it was 8 more, and, it's 14 total now. And the spread, this thing can spread so rapidly. And especially when you're playing sports, the close proximity that you are with people, that just doesn't help anything. And I wonder if this is going to, impact players and maybe their decisions to opt out. We've seen very few players opt out so far in Major League Baseball and the NBA. NFL players, they got about a week to make their decision. So I wonder if this will be in the back of some people's minds now, the spread of it, especially if they're, living with someone who has, underlying health conditions that may be more apt to catch the disease and suffer serious consequences. Mathis, thank you. I appreciate you welcoming me back. Let me get to some of your comments here. And John, first off, close the 8 Mile food establishments immediately. Probably right. We don't want, I don't know how the wings are at some of those places, but we don't need anyone, skirting off to those places to grab a late night snack and, get caught on a Snapchat video or whatever it was, and then all of a sudden put the entire season at risk. And I think that's one of the things. Look, the Lions report for camp on Tuesday. Players have not been in the building. Maybe some injured players have, but players have not been in the building. When they get to camp, everything is going to be completely different. They're going to drive up the first day, take a coronavirus test, then leave and go through virtual meetings. And then I believe, according to the NFL memo, there's testing the second day, but ultimately you have to test 3 days apart, I think it is, before you're allowed access to the building. So they test on Tuesday, they test again on Friday. If my understanding is, when if you test before noon, the lab that the Lions have, the NFL has contracted for testing, promises to have the results back in 24 hours. So everyone who tests before noon on Friday, should have the results Saturday. You come in for physicals. We're still a couple weeks away from real practice beginning. There's going to be a couple weeks of strength and conditioning workouts, and then a slow ramp up period where they're essentially mimicking what would have gone on in the off-season program before they get in the building, before they really put pads on. So I think the NFL is taking a lot of the precautions it needs to prevent the spread of this and to contain it and try to get football going. But there's not a lot that you can do ultimately unless you have that bubble environment and you're controlling everything that happens. The one, Mathis, I'll get to your question here in 1 second. The one question that hasn't been answered, and the player said this on their call the other week, was what happens if you go through a practice on Thursday and then you test positive on a Friday, and then forget the spread that we've seen all these Marlins players have it. Just the people that you come in contact with, those people, in theory, should quarantine for 14 days. If it takes 2 days maybe for the virus to show up, and you don't know, and it could show up anytime in a 2-week period, those players should be quarantining for 14 days that they come in contact with. And as JC Treader said, I'm sorry, Mathis, I'm looking at your name here on my screen. As JC Treader said, what if it's a center, right? You have to take everyone out of the offensive line, meeting. Do they have to be quarantined? Does everyone that they were in the huddle with have to quarantine? Does everyone he blocked on defense have to quarantine? And what about any coaches he came in contact with? So I think there are so many scenarios out there of doom that, some of these things the league is bound to encounter this year, and they don't, at least right now, appear to have good answers for what to do. So Mathis's question is what about media protocols? What kind of content should we expect? Look, I think it's going to be, unfortunately, and this is not to complain. This is just the fact of the matter. It's going to be a different year in terms of the access that we get to players in the team. There are essentially, the NFL has placed everyone in 3 categories, right? There's a tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Tier 1 is players, trainers, coaches, people who have daily access to players. Tier 2 are people who can come in contact with players, other people in the organization, essentially. But there are 10 media members, 2M category, essentially. And those are people who are, in theory, allowed access to the building, the media workroom, who would have access to in-person interviews with coaches. The Lions are not going to have any in-person interviews with coaches, at least off the bat. They would be socially distanced if they were. Some teams, I think, will, but the Lions will not. They're going to do everything by Zoom. All player interviews will be done by Zoom. So we're not going to have any access to the building necessarily. The media members, including myself, who are in that category, will get tested every day. That way we can access the building in case there's an indoor practice. Outside of that, group of 10 reporters, up to 10, because there are 10 up to 10 local reporters. There's the national reporters could come in and take a couple of those spots. But we will be out there every day, the Free Press. And then there's also a 3OA category, which grants outside access to media members. There's 30 spots in that 3OA category. Most of those are given to team employees. I don't know exactly how many the Lions will have, but let's say 5 to 10. So most of the outlets that you're used to seeing cover the team will be able to be out there and will have some access, socially distanced access, no real contact with players or coaches. But we will be out there to bring you everything we can this year. Observations when practices start. Some virtual availability with players and coaches. I mean, there still will be news content coming out, but for sort of the inside the sausage making of it, a lot of the best stories and a lot of the real good things that come from this job are when you're sitting in a locker room and you can shoot the breeze with the guy and get to learn a little bit about his situation and what he likes and his family, and that often leads to good stories, and those will be much more difficult to come by this year. Tyler asks, how many guys can the Lions have on their roster due to COVID? All right, so typically it's 90-man rosters this time of year. The Lions will have, or I don't know if the Lions, but NFL teams are cutting down to 80 players by the time padded practices begin. Teams have the option of cutting down to 80 right now. They can cut down to 80 anytime before practice begins, but if they keep more than 80 to begin with, they have to have 2 split squad workouts, essentially, one at Ford Field, one in Allen Park, or 2 different times of the day in Allen Park. This shouldn't be an issue early. I know we've seen some teams make cuts already. If it was me, I would probably keep my guys, all 90 guys, on the roster for this week at least, have them go through the testing. The first couple days along with the testing, there are virtual meetings. Again, no one is in the building. That way there's a little bit of a baseline for some of these guys if you need to bring them back. It's unfortunate, but I expect a lot of the undrafted rookies will be the ones that get cut, that don't have a chance like they normally would to make the roster. Those guys typically they get all spring and a lot of reps in OTAs and minicamp in the early part of training camp to really show their stuff, and they're not going to have that opportunity this year. One of the unfortunate facts of the time that we're living in with the coronavirus. So the Lions, they have 90 men on their roster right now. They have to be down to 80 by mid-August. I would expect they get down to 80 before then. But again, if I was, running the team, I might want to keep all 90 players there to start, just to get them through that first couple days of testing, get them acclimated with the team when you don't have to worry about the split squad workouts. When you get on the field, I think you want everyone practicing together, everyone out there together. Just makes it easier to learn. And for, your young players, your guys that you're expecting to contribute at some point, whether it's a Jeff Okudah or a Jonah Jackson, a DeAndre Swift, whoever it is, Julian Okwara, that you want those guys all out there with their veteran teammates. So that's the long answer of what the roster will look like. I'll probably do a roster prediction for later this week, and look, it's not going to be, and it's never easy, but it's not going to be an easy one this year. 53 players on the roster. During the regular season, there will be an expanded practice squad, 16-player practice squad this year. So that way it's more like a taxi squad, I guess, that when players inevitably get sick, injured for that matter, but sick, that they can reach down, teams can reach down to their practice squad, promote those players, send them back to the practice squad without fear of losing them. I think of those 16 players, I'm going to have to double check this, but I think 8 of them can be veteran players. So there's no restrictions or limited restrictions, I guess, on the age of those guys. So in theory, you could keep, the Lions have a bunch of veteran offensive linemen on their roster right now, right? They got the 2 rookies they drafted. They brought back Kenny Wiggins and O'Day Abouche, but they also have guys like Russell Bodine, right? So maybe you keep someone like that on your practice squad. You're paying them less than the regular wage, but that way that player is ready should one of your offensive linemen catch the virus and can't play. So I think there are some interesting decisions to be made, and this year more than any will be about the depth of not just your 53-man roster, but your 80-man roster, really, and how you're able to get all of those guys ready for what's sure to be a long season. Because don't forget, not just the Rona, right, but you got injuries that you got to worry about in this sport too, right? So if you lose a couple guys to hamstrings, if you lose a couple guys to knee injuries, whatever the case may be, Achilles, we saw that happen in the lockout when guys were coming back. You have to be able to replace those guys too. Sure, there are some veterans out there, but I think a lot of those guys will come from the people that you initially have on your training camp roster. Tyler says, with no preseason games, how is this going to affect teams this year going into the regular season? Look, Tyler, football is going to be a little sloppier to begin with. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But ultimately, as I said, the biggest losers in this are the guys that can't or won't get the look they typically would. Some of those undrafted rookies. Let me call up I forget all the names. The Lions have the tight end, right? Hunter Bryant. And those would be guys that would normally get a long look, and I would think he would be a guy that would have a shot to make the 53-man roster off the bat in a normal preseason. Maybe he's competing with Isaac Nada for the job, but I don't know how he's going to be able to do that now with not having the opportunity that he would have had otherwise. I mean, Bryant was a guy that a lot of people thought was going to get drafted tight end out of Washington. But it just, coming in with such limited, availability to coaches. I mean, limited time for them to see him on the field. and really assess and teach him, it's going to put him significantly behind the eight ball. Beyond that, no preseason games. I mean, I think it gives teams an opportunity to, yes, they have to rush to get, their players ready. I mean, essentially when they get out there, there's going to be 3 weeks of full practice before, they get into a game week. So, they certainly need to get players ready, but, I think you can be judicious with that a little bit. If you have guys coming off an injury, or guys dealing with, you don't want them, you want to make sure they're ready for week one. You don't need to see them out there, and you can still, at least the Lions, I think, will still err in giving some of their young players some extended reps. I mean, again, the other thing that I think is going to happen, and this doesn't tie in directly to the no preseason games, but I think Peter King had referenced this in his Monday morning quarterback column, is, or the Seahawks, some team was doing it, where you keep your starting quarterback and your backup quarterback separate. You don't have them in the same room together, because what if Matthew Stafford catches corona, right? You need to have Chase Daniel there. Otherwise, you're not going to stand much shot. I mean, that's why you went out and paid him $15 million. So I think you'll see a lot of teams do that. A lot of these meetings are going to be virtual anyways. But if you keep Matthew Stafford and Chase Daniel from each other, at least then you have a sort of fallback plan for if something happens to one of your quarterbacks. Maybe David Blau is in there with Matthew Stafford. I mean, something happens to Chase, Blau is ready for the game. So I think there's still a lot of little things that teams will do throughout the year to try to combat this virus. But circling back to what we said at the beginning, man, it's this news about the Marlins today, it has me a little more leery about the NFL's ability to not only take off, but to finish the season, and that's ultimately what we all want. So for anyone who's on there, on this video, do you have concerns about going to games? Would you go to a game? I mean, if Ford Field is open, let's say it's going to be 25% capacity, how reticent are you to attend a sporting event, whatever event, entertainment event, concert in person, especially after, you may have seen my tweet from yesterday, the NFL, they put out this list of things players can't do, during the pandemic, things that may jeopardize their contract. One of the things the NFL forbids its players from doing right now is going to live sporting events, like attending, a football game essentially as a fan. They're certainly talking about baseball or basketball or anything, but they say no professional sports, which to me, that raises a red flag. Look, it's not I realize it's different being on the field than it is being in the stands, but if they're saying it's not safe for their players to go to games, why in the world will they open up games for fans to go to? So, Mathis, maybe in November or later, maybe, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, look, maybe if this thing is controlled, the spread, sort of stops. I read an interesting article the other day about, or an interesting Twitter chain the other day about, the way that we could get this under control and really bring that spike down in line with, some of the other, developed countries in the Western world. And look, no one wants to go back into another 6-week lockdown, but, if everyone did it at one time, at the start of this whole pandemic, in theory, we wouldn't be in this situation that we are right now. So, I think, our choices as people have really left, us in the situation that we're dealing with now. And that's why, again, not just, professional sports, but for anyone who has kids out there, why, there's no certainty about your children's sports. My daughter plays, she runs cross country, she does basketball. She was doing track last year when that got canceled. My son, he's playing baseball right now. So I'm not living or keeping them in a bubble, essentially. My son is out there playing baseball. He's 5. It's a little different. He's not sitting in a dugout, and they have, social distance rules that they had their first game last week that they are very intent on keeping. I mean, every one player gets essentially a section of a chain link fence, where the bars go up, and you have to stay in that when you're not in the field. So I think I certainly respect the virus, not living in fear of it, and having my kids stay in the basement all summer. But I do wonder and worry about what youth sports and high school sports and college and pro sports, all those will be. So the news about Michigan State last week having to shut down workouts, that was another one that really made me think, like, maybe we won't get college football this fall. I know there's talk about moving into spring, and who knows what happens if that happens, but with the draft, with players declaring or not declaring or taking part in it, but there's so much unknown right now, and I think there's so much that's still going to change between now and the time that we get out there. So you guys got any more questions before I sign off here? Like I said, it's training camp starting up here. Don't know anything about players testing positive yet or not testing, because they're not due in until Tuesday. I think the Lions, give them credit, have handled this offseason the right way. I mean, look, if I was giving the Lions a grade for this offseason, I don't think there's a ton that they did wrong. That's not to say I loved every move they made in free agency, but I'm just a big believer that you don't go spend every last dime you have in free agency either. So I can appreciate the cautious approach to free agency. I think they did an excellent job in the draft. I think the way they handled the offseason program, with everything going on in the world, the social justice movements, the protests, taking time to address those and talk about those and making that a focal point of days and weeks at a time. The way they handled the virus, with not being in a rush to get players back here this summer, and even before that with letting guys, encouraging guys to stay away from gyms and workout facilities, and just doing the mental part of football in the off season. I think they've done a lot right this off season, and maybe that pays off this fall when it comes to what happens on the field. So we'll see when they get to report here this week. They got a lot of work to do, obviously every team does, but should be good to see these guys whenever they get back on the field, and maybe we get some football. Don't know how long, and things like the Miami Marlins situation have me concerned. Maybe the NFL should have done some mini bubbles. Maybe there was some other way they could have gone about this. But I think there will be some spread at some point. But if they can get to the season, they're going to do everything in their power to finish it. Maybe it's not the linear, 16 games in 17 weeks that we're used to. Maybe there's some postponements here or there, or there's some disjointment on the calendar. But there's so much money at stake that I do think if they get to the season, they will try to figure out a way to finish it and play that Super Bowl at some point in February. So, all right, that'll do it for here. I just wrote a little something today on the Lions salary cap situation for 2021 based on the agreement that the league and the Players Association came to over the weekend. Got my stuff up from Sunday with 5 storylines outside of the virus to watch, and working on some more stories as we speak for this week when players report. That'll do it from here. Thanks everyone for joining me on Facebook Live and Freak.com. Dave Birkett. Talk to you again soon.